So there's two main different types of lenses that people tend to categorize them in. One is still photography and the other one is cinema. And the two different types of lenses that you can get from these are prime lenses, which are a fixed focal length, and a zoom lens or a zoom lens. So the two differences, the way these things work is a prime lens is going to be fixed with the focal length. So if you have a 50 millimeter prime lens, that means that you can only have a 50 millimeter focal length, or that's the distance that you're going to be shooting at. You can't change that unless you move the camera. Now, if you have a zoom lens, you can actually set up the camera and you can zoom in and out. And I'm going to go over some of the differences with that, but I want to jump into the differences with a cinema lens and a photography lens, or a lens you put on a DSLR first. So one of the main differences that I've always come in contact with is the way that the aperture works. So the aperture is what lets in the light, and usually on a still lens, these things are clicked. So if you go from an f8 on your aperture and you close it down to an f5.6, you'll notice a very sharp clicking and a sharp decrease or increase in light depending on if you're going up or down. And so what that does is that if you're shooting a video, it looks very uncomfortable to the viewer. So you'll see like this sharp change in light, and it can be very distracting for the viewer. So if you're using a cinema lens, what happens is that this is declicked. And so what that means is that if I was to change the aperture on a cinema lens, it'll be very, very smooth, extremely smooth. Almost, if you do it the right way, you can actually transition from indoor to outdoor. You can actually transition slightly, make these micro adjustments, and the user or the viewer won't even know that you're actually changing the aperture slightly. So that's a really, really cool feature that you can get from a cinema lens versus a still lens. Now, the big difference, the reason why a lot of people, including myself in a lot of cases, use still lenses versus cinema lenses is because the price is just so drastically different. You can get a nice still photography lens for anywhere from $200 to $1,000, right? And for a cinema lens, you're looking at paying thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars for a similar lens. Now the components are different and the way that it works different. It has gears for follow focus and things like that. But those are kind of more advanced features. And if you're just getting into this space, or this is a beginner videography class, I definitely recommend sticking with the still photography lenses. It's going to be more than enough to get you started. And maybe once you kind of progress in your career, you might be interested in getting cinema lenses, but still photography lenses is where it's at. I still recommend the 50 millimeter prime to get started with. It's cost a couple $100, a shallow depth of field, and it's a great lens to get started with. Now, I just used the word prime a little bit. I want to make sure you guys understand that. What that means is that you cannot zoom in or out. So let's say, for example, I have a 50 millimeter, right? That is a fixed lens, right? You can't zoom in or out. And then I have a 28 to 70 millimeter lens, right? So the difference in these two lenses is that the zoom lens, I can zoom in and out, and the fixed lens, I can't zoom in and out. So there offers that flexibility. Now, what's the trade-off there? Well, typically speaking, for the prime lens, or the ones that you can't zoom in, the image quality is slightly better, and you can get a wider aperture, that shallow depth of field, that beautiful bokeh. You can get it for a much, much cheaper price, right? Like I said before, that 50 millimeter, I'm going to keep pressing that on you guys. That 50 millimeter that you can get for $200, you can get it at an f1.8, which is unheard of for that price. If you were to do something similar, let's say the 28 to 70 on the R5, which is a zoom lens, right? That lens, because it is a zoom lens, and it has an f2, which is a shallow depth of field, beautiful bokeh background, because it has those features, you're looking at paying $3,000 for that lens. So they don't get me wrong, the zoom lens is going to shoot a slightly higher quality image, but I've actually done some tests on my YouTube channel where the viewers couldn't actually tell the difference between the $200 lens and the $3,000 lens. So that just gives you an idea of what you're working with there. But that's kind of what I wanted you guys to think about a little bit. The zoom versus the prime, and understanding how those things work, keeping cost in mind, and then understanding the differences between the cinema lenses and the photography lenses. Again, I want to recommend to you guys, go ahead and start out with the photography lenses. I'm going to have a nice number of those kind of lenses that you can possibly use in the future. And then, as always, guys, when you're done with this course, if you have any questions, I'm going to be there to help you guys out.